In November of 2012, I woke up in a sleeping bag on the floor of a music studio just down the street from here in Palo Alto. And I woke up with an idea. My co-founder Gene and I were tackling a new market called the Internet of Things. It's a big buzzword, the next shift in computing. And you know, 87% of people don't know what the Internet of Things is. So let me first tell you. The Internet of Things is the idea that everyday objects that surround us, the lights, the locks, your appliances in your home, are all becoming Internet connected. And there's one big problem with the Internet of Things market. Before you can experience an Internet of Things, you actually first have to go out and buy a thing. And why would you go buy a thing if you've never experienced how it can improve your life? So on that morning in November of 2012, the idea that I came up with would give people an internet-connected thing for free without having to go out and buy one. So how did we do this? We created an app. This app would transform and reimagine spare smartphones and tablets into free internet security cameras. It was really cool. I was very proud of the technology that my team had created. Our users could watch live what was happening from anywhere in the world. They could get motion recorded videos because no one wants to watch a video feed all day long. And you could also talk back to the people and the pets who are nearby your camera. So while I was enamored by how cool it was to just check in on my house from anywhere in the world, the stories that we were getting from people out of this app were really about how they used this as a tool to connect with other people and their pets. So for example, early on, one parent used this app to keep an eye on her quadriplegic daughter, giving her the flexibility and the freedom to just go to the grocery store for a little while. We have one user today who's up to 12 cameras, and she uses this to keep an eye on her 80-year-old mother with dementia. One of my very favorite users, Jerome, who passed away recently, used this to unravel a string of elderly abuse cases in his assisted living facility in Rochester, New York. These are people who were desperate for solutions, so much so that they went on to the App Store and they downloaded an app to help make them feel safe and connected. And these stories really made me realize that this market that we were entering, the Internet of Things, was really not just about things. This is really more about the people. Ahead of us, there's a looming crisis. As the 78 million baby boomers age, the number of seniors in the United States over the age of 75 living alone is going to nearly double by the year 2035. There's a high demand for professional care, and there's not enough caregivers that will be able to supply that demand. So this high demand for care, along with the lack of supply for care, is leading to an explosion of costs to keep people safe and secure. This problem of providing care will touch every single one of us. And it's actually much worse in China. In China, they're about to have as many seniors as the United States has people. Today, it is prohibitively expensive for most people to afford the cost of care. Who usually pays for this? The family caregivers who are going to drive this market. We surveyed and interviewed a few hundred of our users and found that the family caregivers are most concerned about safety-related things. Like, did Dad take his medicine today? Did Grandma fall or get out of bed? And these are people who have a lot to think about. They just got done raising their own kids, and now they're being sucked back into caring for their parents. When are they going to have time to live their own lives? Most family caregivers here in the United States today live over 100 miles away from the ones that they care for, which is different from previous generations. These are people who want help and they want support. They don't want to feel guilty that they didn't do enough, but they also just cannot afford the cost of professional care. Caregivers across the country are getting burned out, plain and simple. This is leading to a decrease in quality of care, which then leads to higher medical expenses. Now, the seniors, on the other hand, even though their eyesight is getting worse, they have arthritis, their hearing is bad, they aren't so concerned about the risks they face, but they do feel the strain of psychological challenges. They can feel lonely, but they don't want to be a burden on their family. One person reported that her father had fallen in the kitchen and he had his emergency button right there with him, but he refused to press it. And it was days until somebody actually found him on the floor. He was embarrassed about the situation, and he just didn't want to be a burden on the rest of his family. So if you map the caregivers and the seniors to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you'll find that the caregivers are most concerned about the physiological stuff at the bottom. Did grandma get out of bed this morning? Did dad take his medicine? Did the person fall down? But the seniors are facing psychological challenges. They're primarily dealing with psychological needs, specifically loneliness. They want to feel like they belong, they want to feel like they're loved, and they want to feel connected. A woman stopped me on the streets of Bellevue, Washington one day, and she frantically asked me, "Have you seen my mom?" I didn't know what this woman's mother looked like. She explained her mom had dementia and had just wandered off. We found her later on the wrong floor of her apartment building, trying to get into someone else's apartment that looked similar to hers, but wasn't quite. So the seniors are, they need help, and at the top of this triangle, you have self-actualization. This is really achieving, your maximum potential. I don't know for sure, but I feel like this may be beyond what most seniors are capable of. My wife's grandmother just turned 102 years old a couple weeks ago. And my wife called up her grandmother and said, "Hey, Grandma, anything new and exciting happening?" And her grandmother replied, "Not everything needs to be new or exciting." So what we need is a solution that combines both the basic needs for the caregiver, making sure that their loved ones are safe and secure, along with the psychological needs faced by the senior. It needs to provide continuous care, even though the caregivers, the family caregivers, live so far away. And both the caregiver and the senior need to buy into the solution. The caregiver is putting in their time and money. The senior has to feel comfortable with having sensors and things around their homes. But I want you to remember, this really isn't about sensors and things. This is about people. And if we don't find a solution for this, the problems that we're facing today are going to get worse and worse. Now, some people believe that the Internet of Things will come to save us with connected sensors and devices and robots. We all know how that story turns out. The people who believe that the Internet of Things is the answer are partially right, but the Internet of Things can't solve everything. You see, everyone who is taking an engineering approach to this market is focused only on the bottom of Maslow's triangle. And they're focused on use cases like, is the person physically alive? Did grandma get out of bed this morning? Did dad take his medicine? Is mom with dementia wandering off again? We have activity sensors in the home that can do that. We have gas meters and temperature sensors that can let you know if the stove has been turned on too long and automatically turn things off. Door and window sensors let us know if a person is coming and going. And these are all good use cases, but you need more than that, because in order to provide a solution that delivers on both the physical needs of the caregiver and the psychological needs of the senior, you have to include people, and you have to form new connections between people that deliver love and self-esteem. You have to go beyond the things. And the same observation applies to healthcare in general. It's not about the medicine, it's about the people. My friend and mentor Stan pointed out to me one day, winning is not living for another 10 years with dementia. Winning is living the way you want to as a role model for your family. So if you start with the Internet of Things, you quickly realize it's not good enough. Even the name Internet of Things is not good enough. Let's break that down. So you have internet. That's like your central nervous system. It's connecting stuff from point A to point B. And then you have things. That's like my hand, able to sense and interact with the environment around me. So there you have it. That's the Internet of Things. It's basically a hand. I'm convinced that this was predicted in the mid-1950s when the Addams family released Thing T Thing. Do you really want Thing taking care of your parents when they get older? Where is the brain in all of this? As it turns out, the brain is in cloud computing. Computers in some far-off land that are running bots or apps in the background of your life, able to add a layer of intelligence on top of all these things. Cloud computing is what enables us to add thoughts to things. And if you look at the history of the internet, it started out with a very heavy engineering focus, but evolved with it a set of killer apps. These killer apps were all social and enabled people to connect together in new ways. As we moved on to mobile, again, it started out with a heavy engineering focus, but all of the killer apps were social. The killer apps for the next phase of computing, which I prefer the phrase ambient computing instead of Internet of Things, because I think Internet of Things kind of lacks a brain. So for the next phase of computing, this ambient computing, where computers are and intelligence is surrounding us, it will be driven by killer apps that are all social. Socialization is a key to healthy aging, allowing people to stay in touch in deeper and more meaningful ways. And later, I believe this will evolve beyond smart homes into smart cities. And just to be overtly clear, I think that smart cities are not about boring stuff like connecting traffic lights and cars and plumbing. Care will be part of the framework and the foundation of any truly smart city. So to wrap this up, I believe there are really three components that are required for any kind of solution that will deliver on care for caregivers and elderly. First, these will be dubbed killer apps because they will go social and viral. Caring and sharing is a viral activity, and it's the feeling of connection that can make these killer apps feel like a gift to the senior instead of a privacy invasion. Memories are one way to generate that feeling of connection. We studied about 26 people across an average of 15 days per family, sharing over 200 photos, audio clips, and video clips, ranging from everyday events to vacations to old family photos and more. These were all shared across multiple generations of the family. And what we learned was astounding. What started off as a study ended up becoming a daily ritual for some of these families. Caregivers felt less guilty about not staying in touch. The seniors felt more connected. One grandmother reported that she felt like the family was back together again. This led us into kind of a new domain of user experience research that we call family-centric design. I'm really convinced that family-centric design will lead the development of this market. Next, you've got the out-of-box experience. It's the caregivers who are a little more technically savvy. They're the ones who are going to be setting everything up. Their out-of-box experience has to be so smooth. This whole market is enabled by trust. And the moment when someone gets a product or a service out of the box is the moment when they decide whether or not to trust you. And finally, inclusive design. I think engineers don't think enough about this. We're dealing with a population that has accessibility issues, not just the seniors, but the caregivers, the family caregivers. So designing for people with poor eyesight, poor hearing, arthritis, and forgotten passwords not only benefits the oldest person, but it makes the design easier for everyone. As one example, Amazon Alexa is demonstrating a radical shift away from traditional UIs into something more natural. So already today, we can call for help using Alexa, using only our voice, and the paramedics can actually show up at the house if there's a problem. That's going to be extremely important in the future, where grandmother no longer has to remember to put on her ugly emergency button that makes her feel old. She can just use her voice to call for help. This care problem needs to be solved. The stakes are too high. Each one of us will be affected by this. And the technology is here today. The opportunity is enormous, but it's really too big for any one person or company to do alone. We all have to come up with the solutions that make this work. But in doing so, I want you to always remember this. This market is all about the people. It's not about the things. I've got time for any questions if you guys have any. Yeah, so one thing we're exploring right now is a concept of more of a digital picture frame that can share these memories across multiple generations of a family. That was the study that we have been doing, and what's interesting is the seniors really didn't interact with the technology, so we didn't really know if it was working for them or not. But in the focus groups after the study, we learned that the seniors loved it. They'd walk by their digital picture frame, which other people are uploading content to throughout the day, and they could see that the family was interacting, and that was something that they were completely missing out on before. So that was huge. But then I think that's kind of the start, is getting that feeling of connection and feeling of love for that senior, but using that as a springboard to get more technology into the home that's really helping the caregiver know if things are okay. It will be, yeah. This will be towards the end of the year, yeah. We'll be doing expanding our beta program in October in both the U.S. and in Europe for that. Yeah.
Anyone who's thinking influence you, any references you recommend for designing for elderly folks?
Any references for designing for elderly folks?
Yeah, like
right?
Anything you'd recommend reading up on?
Boy, there's a lot. So my company, People Power Company, really tries to form relationships with other universities that are out there. I think that universities are really tackling some of the tough problems in this market as far as the design goes. One of the things we do, though, is as we have a set of designers, and we actually have 2 PhD psychologists on our staff as well. And as a software company, that's kind of unique, I think. But we use this to create designs, and then we use tools like, for example, there's a tool called user testing, where we can quickly put out a wireframe or even a high-fidelity mock-up to a crowd of people, and we can get feedback within hours of actual videos of people using that design that we put out. So as far as testing the design, that's what we do there. But we typically start by interviewing people, and then we take it on into wireframes, and then we slowly get up to a high fidelity mock-up and then a full interaction design. I think there are a lot of books on the topic, though. Maybe after this we can connect and I can share a couple. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's tough. So connecting this with the system of care for the senior, right? And then how do you get towards the top of that triangle, the self-actualization? Yeah. And when you asked about connecting with the system of care for the senior, are you referring more to professional type of care, connecting with health and things like that? What type of system?
As a doctor and a caregiver, I'm thinking about beyond just the doctor. All the different elements of it.
Right. Well, So as far as connecting in with community and other parts of other elements of the solution, it's sort of tough, I think, to get some of the seniors who are less technically savvy to really get in there and engage with the technology. In some cases, the arthritis or just not being familiar with the technology makes it more difficult. One of the things we found is that as you go up into higher modalities of communication, beyond text to voice and voice to video, it may become easier to get the seniors to contribute and interact. I think there are big opportunities to explore the creation of what I would call community social networks, where based on your location, there are people around you who may be in a similar situation who can help provide care for your loved ones, or maybe you can provide care for them, and maybe there's also a support network for specific afflictions and diseases out there. These are all opportunities that are available to explore. We are just scratching the tip of the iceberg of that right now. Well, I think, actually, I was listening to a talk just before lunch about forming habits. And one of the points that was brought up in that talk is that you don't necessarily want to be notifying the person every time to take their medicine. You really want them to build these habits on their own and challenge them to do that. So the approach we're taking is really, we start with maybe a connected pill box. And if you didn't take your medicine, then maybe we step in to remind the senior. And if you still didn't take your medicine, and by the way, it depends on the medicine. If it's a daily vitamin, maybe we don't care so much as a prescription medication. But as the importance of the medication increases, then maybe we reach out to your family social network there, this private social network, to get the sons and daughters to pick up the phone and say, hey, Dad, I saw you didn't take your medicine today. Yeah. Annoying a person to death to make them take their medicine, yeah. I think I'm about out of time here, but I'm available, I'll be at the conference today and tomorrow, and I'd love to meet up and talk more about this with you.